All right, so the bonus is it's Matthew 24, starting in verse 36. So, like I said, I went through this part in the Revelation study again, and I have different commentaries now. So, and when I was reading through it, they're pointing it out in a different way, and then I go back and read some of the old commentaries that I had, and I'd be darned, like they were all saying about the same thing. So it's just something different. And two things I really want to point out, because we talked about Enoch, and we've went through Noah and that already, so this kind of fits in with that. But it's Matthew 24, verse 36 through 40. I'll read it here. No one knows about, and so just so you know, the whole chapter of Matthew 24 talks about the end of times, okay? With the Revelation study, we referred back to that a lot, the whole chapter of 24. But starting there in 36, it says, no one knows about the day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. This is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. And then verse 40 here and 41 is what I'm going to put a little different twist on it. Two men will be left in the field, one will be taken and the other left. Two women will be grinding with a hand mill, one will be taken and the other left. Okay, so just a little review of that. So in the days of Noah, it's going to be like the end of times. And we've talked about this even when we covered Noah and that. Not only just all the sin that's going on in Noah's time and at the end times, but also people are just going on about their everyday life too. Okay, it says they're eating and drinking and giving marriage. Life is going on, and all of a sudden Jesus is coming back. But I used, if anybody remembers this from this probably a year or more ago, but I used Noah as an example. So Noah got into the ark, and I used Noah as an example of how I think that's one way, like the rapture when it happens will be pre-tribulation, because Noah is saved, is putting in the ark, just like the church will be saved before the tribulation. But when I was going through it again, okay, I found out something a little more in there. So if you remember Enoch, which is like Noah's great grandfather, it's either great great grandfather or great grandfather. So Enoch, okay, was already gone. Enoch did not die. The good Enoch did not die. It just says he went to be with the Lord. So Enoch did not die. So take Enoch to resemble the church. So still works the same, pre-rapture. So Enoch went to be with the Lord. That's the church. Then Noah could be used to represent, say, the Israel nation during the tribulation, how it's kind of preserved during the tribulation. And then when it's talking here and it says, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. Okay, so it's talking there, all the unbelievers in Noah's day are all washed away. Okay, but then when it goes into verse 40 and 41 are always used to describe what happens during the rapture. But if it's already talking about the end times here before that, why would it switch over to the rapture talking about 40 and 41? So if you take this verse 40 and 41 and take it to the end times, when it says two men will be left in the field, one will be taken and the other left, the one taken is the unbeliever. He's going to the white throne judgment that we talked about when we did Revelation. He's going to be judged. In the same way with the women, the one that's taken is the unbeliever. Okay, they're going to their eternal punishment once they get through the white throne. And then the man and the woman that's left are the believers left during the tribulation, ones that, came to faith during the tribulation. If you remember, then they entered that 1,000-year reign, that millennial reign. So that's just a different way. And I don't know which way is right. Both ways might be right. I have no idea. It's just something else that I've learned, another way to look at it. That verse 40 and 41 there, yes, could be used to describe what happens right at the rapture, but it also could be at the end times too, where the ones that are taken are the unbelievers. They're going on to get sentenced at the white throne judgment, and the ones that are left are the ones that survive the tribulation, and then, like I said, they enter right into the millennial reign. Now you gotta go way back and think about what we talked about when we did the end of Revelation, but it's just something else I wanted to throw in. that come up, and I'm like, man, I never thought of it that way. So just another thing. But we'll go into Genesis 15. All right, so Genesis 15, where we left off, and so in 14, and what we're doing in here, we're just walking step by step through Genesis, and we're in 15 right now. So in verse 14, if you remember, there was that battle between the 5 kings and the 4 kings, and the 5 kings lost, and then they took Lot, and then Abram. Now, I should have never talked about Noah. I'm going to mess that up the rest of the day. Golly. So Abram, I can't wait till he finally changes his name to Abraham, because this Abram thing is throwing me off too all the time. But Abram, remember, took the 318 trained men and went in there and defeated the 4 kings, which the 5 kings couldn't defeat the 4 kings, but Abram could with only 318 men, and he rescued Lot out. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at now. Then he got the reward. Either he had to choose from Melchizedek, which was an interesting character, or also the king of, I think it was king of Sodom, offered him all kinds of riches, and he said, I wouldn't even take a shoelace from you. That way you can never say that you made me rich. So he just took the bread and wine from Melchizedek. So in 15, that's where we're gonna take off from there. This is going to be a chapter 15 is going to be a chapter about Abram's emotions. Okay, there's going to be 3 different concerns that he has, and this is what it's mostly going to talk about. And this is a good life lesson about say, don't let our emotions run wild. Okay, don't let you've heard the saying, don't let your emotions get the best of you. But also you cannot not pay attention to them. Okay, you gotta have they need to be there, but they don't need to be controlling everything. All right, so the first concern that I never should have did that. Abram has is going to be about his fear and his safety. So chapter 15, verse 1. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. And that phrase there, the word of the Lord, that's going to be used like 100 more times here in the Old Testament. So after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. And it says, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. You are your very great reward. Okay, so his first concern is his safety. We don't know why he's worried about its safety, but the word of the Lord wouldn't have said, hey, do not be afraid, Abram, if he wasn't fearful of something. And it could have been, maybe he's afraid of another possible battle that might go on. I mean, he just already had a miraculous victory with only 318 guys. He destroyed these 4 kings, but yet he's still afraid of something. Maybe that he's worried about them guys coming back into power and trying to take him over. Who knows? We don't really know, but he's afraid of something. And notice there it says, do not be afraid, Abram. Okay, so this is very personal to him. It's not just, a generic statement. It's being right there personal to Abram. And there, okay, it says, I am your shield. And you don't have to turn there because I got it mostly wrote down here. But Romans 8:31 talks about, if God is for us, who can be against us? And right here, God is telling Abram that I am your shield, I am your great reward. And if God's offering you protection, you pretty much count on it. I don't think you'd have too much to worry about. And this goes along great with, it says the word of the Lord. Okay, came to Abram. Faith in the word will conquer fear, not faith in our feelings. We can be feeling all kinds of stuff, fearful, going to say even simple things of going to talk in front of somebody. Like for kids, going to take a test at school, your fear, your emotions can get the best of you. But you put your faith in the word of God, it'll get you through. All right, so we'll move on. So that first verse was his first concern, his fear, his safety he's worried about. what we'll get into now, he's concerned about his heir, because we all know he's been promised this heir, and he's going to be a father of a lot of nations, but yet he still hasn't seen an heir come around. So verse 2, but Abram said, O sovereign Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eleazar of Damascus. So what is this talking about? God has already promised him an heir, and he's like, I have no kid, so it must be, my heir must be this Eleazar of Damascus. And who is this? This is a somebody that works for Abram, which we'll find out here in just a second. But at that time, it was custom that, imagine these, I guess, like plantain-ish kind of things. You got your head of the household. If they can't have kids, then their servants, people who work for them, they can basically pick their right-hand man to be their heir, their lineage, I guess, so to say. So it was custom at the time, but this is not what God is promising him. So this Eleazar is somebody that works for him. So verse 3, and Abram said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household, which is that Eleazar, will be my heir. And then it goes on, verse 4. Then the word of the Lord came, so there's that phrase again. The word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir. Okay, so God reassuring him again that no, it's not going to be this dude that works for you. It's going to be your own child. Then he goes into verse 5 there. He took him outside and said, so God took Abram outside, look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. I forget, I read a statistic that said how many stars are out there, that like what you could, like if you go out in the dark and actually look, like how many thousands you can actually see with your eyes. And then, obviously if you're in California, you can see other ones, but I forgot what it was, but it's a lot. But the point I want to make here with this, so God has already told him that your offspring will be like the dust of the ground. Okay, and now he's got the stars of the sky. So we move from the dust to the stars. So think of it this way. God's telling him, no matter if you're looking up or you're looking down, it should be a reminder of what I promised you. So you shouldn't be able to go anywhere. Outside, look at the stars, like boom, there's all my offspring. Look at the dirt on the ground, there's all my offspring. It's just a really, really neat way, and I never would have figured that out if somebody didn't point it out to me, that hey, no matter which way he looks, he's being reminded of God's promise. Okay, so verse 5, then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Verse 6, Abram, okay, this is real important right here. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Now, people start using big words I can't understand to explain all this, and how, like, if we're followers of Jesus, we're not righteous until we have Jesus in our heart, okay? And then, he makes us righteous, which means, see, it's one of them words that, like, it's hard for me to even explain what righteousness means. To be right with the Lord is the way I kind of put it. That could be a little bit wrong. But so for Abram, it said Abram believed the Lord, and then the Lord credited it to him as righteousness. So Abram had believing faith. That's what I want you to get out of that. He had believing faith, okay? And this is pointed out several different times in the New Testament. Romans 4:3, and you all don't have to turn there. I got them marked. But Romans 4:3 says, what does the scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Then also Galatians 3:6, it says, consider Abraham. He believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And then one more time it says it, James 2:23. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. So, in the Old Testament, they didn't have Jesus to put their faith in to be saved. But Abraham had saving faith. He was a righteous man of God, right here in this verse. Um, and the word here that's used for believe, in Hebrew, it's where we get amen from too. And the basics of amen, there's several little different translations, but amen for the most part basically just means I agree. Okay, so Abram is saying I agree with you, Lord. And it also can mean to lean your whole weight upon. So it's not just being like, okay, I believe you, hopefully you're right. No, it's whole weight. He's all in, okay, for God. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's all in. And then this is a good point to ask yourself, do you have that believing, that saving faith? And, for us, it's Jesus. Have that believing faith in Jesus. Not just I believe Jesus, like historical figure kind of guy, like, yeah, he existed, he did this, he's the Son of God. But do you truly believe in your heart that he's the Son of God and that you made him your Lord and Master, and you're all in on him, and your life actually reflects that you're all in on him? Yes, we're still going to stumble, just like Abraham is going to stumble here pretty quickly. But you're still all in for Jesus, that you got the believe faith, the saving faith. All right, so that was 6. So then we'll go into verse 7. And this is that there he's worried about he's concerned about his heir, okay? And then now the last part of this is he's going to be concerned about his land. So he's concerned about his safety, his heir, and then now the land. Because remember, God had promised him he's going to get this land of the Canaanites and all that, but he's still yet to see that too. All right, so it says there, verse 7. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. Okay, so we'll actually get a little bit more detail of what this land he's supposed to take possession of at the end of this chapter. Okay, so in verse 8 it says, But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? So he's doubting here a little bit. So verse 9. So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. And then verse 10. Abram brought, and this is going to be like a covenant thing they did at this time, and I'll kind of explain it. Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite of each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. So apparently the culture at this time, when people made a covenant with each other, they brought all these animals, cut them in half, okay, and then laid them out on the ground. And then they would take like a torch and burn them. Why? They're like two people. So like say me and Chet were having a covenant with each other, making a promise to each other. They got all these dead animals laying everywhere. And we're going to walk through and burn them. And knowing that if one of us breaks this covenant, okay, that's what's going to happen to the person that breaks it. You're going to get cut up and you're going to get burned. You're going to be, if whoever breaks the covenant will be treated just like the animals there. But so God is wanting him to get this set up that way, but it's going to be a little different here between God and Abram. Okay, there's going to be a little deviance on it. It's not going to take the two of them because God don't need anybody else to help him keep his promises. God's going to do it all himself. So did everybody understand like how that the cutting of the pieces and walking through the fire? Because if not, I brought Tony Evans in because he can probably explain it a little bit better than I can if you need to. But I think I did it all right. So we'll read the rest of this and then I'll kind of go back and talk about it a little bit. So verse 12. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. So what's that all about? That's when, eventually he gets his heir and then gets his people. They're going to be enslaved, be strangers in a country and enslaved. That's all the Israelites in Egypt, okay? Then they get the promised land, and then they're awful, then they get out, and then they get back in. Same way it goes to even all the way to this day with the Jews and that over in Israel to this day. One minute they have this ground, next minute they're in a battle about trying to get the Gaza Strip back. All that ground over there that it's always been fighting on is happening way back in this day, and it's all part of it. So he's just right there God is foreshadowing that they're going to be under Pharaoh's control there in Egypt for a while, for 400 years. Verse 14, but I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterwards they will come out with great possessions, get into the promised land. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation of your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorite has not yet reached its full measure. And that right there, I do not know what he's talking about. That it's got to be something all within the history, I'm going to say, between Exodus and maybe Kings and all that. I did not go back and look it up, but it is pretty. It would be interesting to figure, okay, what was that exactly talking about? But I just don't know. So verse 17. So remember, Abram has got all these dead carcasses laying out, but nobody's walked through them yet. So they ain't done the covenant yet. And Abram is in a deep sleep right now. So verse 17, when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Canaanites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Gershites, and Jebusites. So all that land. Okay, now I'm not a geography person. I have no idea where all that is, and if it takes too much digging into history books to figure out exactly what all that is. But let's just say, just so you know, like all that land right there that Abraham was promised, that is still the fights that go on, the wars that go on to this day is all over that kind of ground. And it's going to until Jesus comes back. It's just it's going to be that way. But notice in them last verses there, so earlier Abraham set out all the pieces for the covenant, but then God has Abram asleep, and so God himself walks through the pieces with his torch. What did it say? Smoking fire pot with a blazing torch. So God does it all. Okay, he's walking through these pieces by himself. He don't even need Abram to walk with him, because God's the only one that's going to be able to fulfill this covenant. He don't need Abram to do it. Abram can't do it. I mean, he's not quite 90-something years old yet. Here soon he's going to be 99 years old and still don't have a kid. I mean, he ain't going to be getting this job done himself, but God's going to be able to take care of it. So God himself will fulfill the covenant, and Abram will just be doing his part. But God did not need Abram to walk through the carcasses, because only God can fulfill the covenant himself. All right, good deal. That's a heck of a way to make a covenant, though. Just go cut up a bunch of animals and walk through them and burn them. But that would be pretty bad. I'd be like, Chet, man, if you don't do your part here, I'm gonna cut you up into pieces and walk through your meat and burn you. I mean, that would be awful.
But the crime rate would drop.
Right. I bet people's word would probably mean more than what it means. You know what I mean? If they walk through that.
Yeah.
All right. So, verse 16. It's not going to take Abram long, even though it says Abram believed the Lord and it was credited to him as righteous. It ain't going to take long for Abram to stumble here. The next chapter. One of the commentaries had it a title is Beware of Detours, okay? Because God's promising Abram all this stuff here. And Abram and Sarah are going to start getting impatient. And they're going to try to like push this promise, this covenant a little bit faster. Take a little detour, not God's way. They're going to try to do it their own way, and it's not going to work out the greatest for them. And this is another great point, that sin always matters. Rick says that all the time, and I mean, he even wrote a book about it, which I haven't, or a devotional thing. I haven't went through it all yet. Well, I haven't went through any of it yet, but I want to. But sin always matters. So you think of all the, even the great heroes of the faith. Just think of David. He had sinful times. And all the sin that we commit, it always matters to God. Yes, we got God's grace, but even with this, I guess you can call it adultery that Abram's getting ready to get into, it causes a problem down the road. So you might not always see the problems that your sin causes, but sin always matters. And then beware of detours. That's the two things to take away before we get in here to 16. All right, so verse 1 of chapter 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. Now, if you remember, in chapter 12, verse 16, I said that when he was getting all these maidservants and men servants, that one of them maidservants is going to come back. But I'll read chapter 12, verse 16. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, men servants and maidservants, and camels. Okay, and if you remember, that was when he told the Egyptian Pharaoh that, hey, this isn't my wife, this is my sister. And then all the bad stuff was starting to happen to the Pharaoh, and he's like, hey, why didn't you tell me that Sarah was your wife and not your sister? Or why did you tell me that she was your sister and not your wife? And then, Pharaoh was giving him all that stuff. And one of them maidservants that he was given was Hagar, that we're going to read about right here. So chapter 16, verse 1, she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So verse 2. So she said to Abram, and this is Sarah, his wife, said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her. So Sarah is blaming God. That is the reason why she ain't having kids yet, because it says the Lord has kept me. She's saying it's God is keeping me from having children. And then it says, perhaps I can build a family through her. So she's wanting to try to do it her way and not God's way. Abram and Sarah, they're getting impatient, waiting on God to fulfill his promise. And now they're trying to devise their own plan, their own detour, so to say, around the problem. And here, you don't have to go there, but Hebrews 6:12, okay? It says, the faithful and patient will inherit what God promises. And right here, Abram and Sarah are not being faithful and they're not being patient at the moment. But Hebrews 6:12 is what says that the faithful and patient will inherit what God promises. Sarah's blaming God for being barren, okay? But now here's the problem. So she's blaming God, and she's wanting to devise this plan, but I didn't read the rest of verse 2 there. The rest of verse 2 says, Abram agreed to what Sarah said, okay? And Abram is not being the best spiritual leader. We've talked about this ever since we studied Adam and Eve. Abram is not being the spiritual leader of the house, okay? He agreed to what Sarah said, okay? Sarah said, hey, go sleep with my maidservant. And Abram is agreeing with her. He's not being the spiritual leader. What he should have been doing was no, honey, there's no reason to worry about this. Like, God said he's got it. We're going to have a kid. We're going to have heir. We're going to be the father of a nation. God said we're going to do it. we should not be trying to circumvent what God's saying, but he's not being the leader that he should be. He's not affirming God's promise. He's going along with Sarah's plan. And this should be a step. I don't know if it'd probably ever happen to any of us, for all that's married. But if your wife ever says, like, hey, why don't you go ahead and go have sex with that girl, I would advise not to.
Yeah.
Okay?
Real bad
You know what I'm saying?
Never
'Cause
gonna end well.
it doesn't take long before this all goes to pots. You know what I mean? But, I mean, that's a life lesson you can put right there in that. It doesn't matter if she says, no, honey, it's fine. No, I would not do it. So, just a little extra, it doesn't say that right here, but I'm pretty sure that's not the right way to go with it.
I don't think my wife will ever have to. I don't have to worry about herself.
Right. I don't think any of us have to, but it's
I
still.
know Daniel, and I know yours too. So.
But it's definitely a good thing to remember. And so, yeah, Abram not being the spiritual leader, which we've seen that happen several times already here through Genesis, where the men are failing. And guess what? I mean, it's what happens today. Why do we got men that don't even know that they're men? Because we failed over ever since time began. And this, so just so you know, this practice of like the head of the household marrying a servant, like a maidservant, it was custom at the time. Like it's not like it was unheard of. Okay, it's still not God's way. It's not one man, one woman, but they still did it at this time. Where like if the wife couldn't bear children, then he would go, just like what Sarah's wanting to happen, go to a servant of the house and make him your wife, and have kids and stuff with them. It was a practice at the time, but it's still not God's way. So verse 3 there. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar, okay, and gave her to her husband to be his wife. Okay, so to them, they still did the whole marriage thing and all that, made to be his wife, okay, but this is not God's way of wife, and we'll read later that God did not approve of this. This is, worldly things that people did at the time. Cultural things that people did at the time, but it's not God's way. So even though they think they're trying to do it right, it is not done right. All right, verse 4. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress, which was Sarah. But you see how fast that happened? Okay. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. So this is going to leave Sarah. I've got a lot of names I got to concentrate on this. So this is going to leave Sarah realizing that, okay, hey, the problem this whole time why we haven't had kids, remember she was trying to blame God, but it has been her, because apparently Abram is fertile enough, okay, because like boom, one time here with Hagar and we got it done, she conceived. So this is going to lead to turmoil and quarreling among all of them. And it said it already started. When she knew she was pregnant, meaning Hagar, she began to despise her mistress, Sarah. So there's already quarreling, and Sarah realizes it's her issues, with her body that's keeping them from having children with Abram, and not anything to do with Abram. And there's quarreling going on among them among them, and then they're gonna be fighting amongst like all three of them. They're not all going to get along here. Because why? Because sin always matters. So verse 5, then Sarah said to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. All right, so Sarah is the one that told Abram, oh, go sleep with my maidservant. But now she's like, hey, it is your problem. You are responsible, it says, for the wrong that I am suffering. So that's what I mean. If your wife ever tells you, hey, go ahead and do that, I would not advise to do it. It didn't take long at all for that to change. It goes from her idea to now, hey, you're the one causing me all this suffering here. Verse 7.
6.
6, yep, that's what I was close. Your servant is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. And Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled. So, like I said, there's quarreling among all of them now. First, Abram thought he was doing Sarah a favor. Now Sarah is mad at Abram. And then Hagar is despised Sarah, and then now Sarah is mistreating Hagar, so she's just leaving. You know, while she's pregnant, she's leaving. Okay? Single mom out there, all on her own. Then verse 7. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur, and he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai. So right there, it doesn't say Hagar, wife of Abram. Because remember earlier it said Hagar, that was in verse 3, to make husband to be his wife. I'll just read it. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian maid servant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. So that's why I said that was custom. That was something worldly they were trying to do. But here, God doesn't say Hagar, Abraham's wife. No, it says Hagar, servant of Sarah. So even though the custom at the time, the worldly thing at the time, approved of that wife, that marriage, all that, God did not. Okay? Hagar is still just a servant of Sarah, not the wife of Abram. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. Okay? This leads to a point here. So Abram now is promised two massive groups of future people, future offspring, because he's got the covenant with God about an heir for kids of many nations. The stars in the sky, the dust of the ground. But now, here with Hagar, he's got this mistress, and this child going to be born to her, and the angel there says the descendants of this will be too numerous to count. So there's going to be two massive groups, okay, that Abram is going to be the granddaddy of them all. All right, so verse 11, and this is what the angel of the Lord also said to her. You are now with child, and you will have a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears, okay? For the Lord has heard of your misery. So it's fitting that Ishmael means God hears, because she's getting mistreated by Sarai, and she's leaving. She's crying out to God. God hears her, sends this angel. Angel confronts her. So Ishmael means God hears, and for the Lord has heard of your misery. And this, honestly, you could use this for support to any, single moms out there, or, because like I said, men suck nowadays. I mean, we all do. Some suck more than others, but man, look how many fatherless kids are born all the time. And right here, this Hagar was going to be leaving, going to deal with this all on her own. But God heard her, her cries, in her misery. And it just should be fitting. Like, you could use this for, like, if you would ever have anybody that you know of in a situation like this, that, God can hear that single mother cry for help. At this time, Hagar, she didn't have no place to call home. She left everything. But God heard her cry of affliction, and it's comforting to her, and it should be comforting for any mothers, that need to reach out towards God when they're in this situation. So verse 12 there, and this is talking about Ishmael, he will be a wild donkey of a man. Now that is not meant to be, I know, right? I mean, that's the way I would talk. So they finally put my kind of language in here. And this is not meant to be a compliment. And no matter what translation you read, it's not meant to be a compliment. His hands will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. Okay, so Ishmael's descendants, when he finally becomes born, and all his descendants, they're going to be an unruly people. Okay, and they're going to bring a lot of conflict to not just a lot of people, but especially the Jews. Okay. Ishmael's descendants, so according to all the history stuff and all that, a lot of the Arab type people, okay, from Ishmael. Now don't get me wrong, there's still some good ones, but a lot of the problems that we got to deal with, you know, when I don't understand all that Middle East stuff, but just Ishmael's line, think of them, because it comes up again later too, but the Arabs that usually are always fighting the Jews. Okay, and just think that's both of Abram's descendants, because sin always matters. Even though Abram was a friend of God, it said there in Hebrews, whatever that was, but he committed the sin, and sin always matters. So he now is going to be the father of the descendants that are going to also be father of the Jews that are always going to be quarreling for however many thousands of years since this has been written. I mean, that's pretty fascinating to think about. One man, and then they tried to make a detour of going around God's way, and it did not work out into his favor. But to the mother here, to Hagar, you know, this angel come down and is comforting her and knowing that, hey, God hears you, and Hagar is going to be treated well towards God, because you know God felt for her. All right, so verse 13. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called that Bir La Roy, which means the well of the living one who sees me. That's if you translate that. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. And then verse 15. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. So Abram's now 86, okay, has a son. I mean, I don't know if they probably use the words illegitimate. It's a legitimate son. Like, I mean, that it's his son, but it's not the one God made the covenant on. It's not the one God promised. And then this line from here, from Ishmael, like I said, will always be in battle with the Jews, the Israelites, throughout the course of history. Now there was a whole thing on that. For the Lord, you are the God, in verse 13, you are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. There was a lot of stuff about that. I don't really understand it. I mean, if you want to go back and kind of dig into it, you're welcome to. But it was a lot of word salad stuff to me. I didn't quite understand. But it's more, the way I took the basics of it is that, you know, God sees this lonely pregnant woman out here on her own. That's the way I took the most of it. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns? I think I'm going to save 17 and 18 then for the next time. Yeah, because I really don't want to get halfway through, because there's really no break. It all talks about the kind of the same thing. Sometimes you know how them chapters will have, like, half a chapter will be talking about something and half the other, but it all kind of goes together, so I don't really want to break it up too much. 18 I could have, but we won't get that far. There's only a few minutes left.